They said excitement could kill him. No one explained what the absence of it was already doing. The gala hall was quiet in the way expensive rooms always are, polished, careful, restrained. Sebastian Crowell Arden stood near the back of the room, surrounded by donors who spoke softly about generosity and legacy. Across the floor, his son sat exactly where he was told to sit. Still, watched, calm. Doctors had warned them years ago. Emotional spikes could trigger an episode, so they removed the spikes. The laughter, the surprise, the joy. What they didn't remove was the boy's awareness. Near the service aisle, Mallory Jackson moved between tables, unnoticed, doing what she'd been hired to do. She wasn't supposed to look at the stage. She wasn't supposed to notice the child watching it, but she did. And when the music shifted, just slightly, she saw something no protocol had prepared them for. The boy smiled, not politely, not briefly, but fully. What Sebastian witnessed moments later wasn't disobedience. It wasn't kindness, and it wasn't a mistake. It was something far more dangerous. Because once a child is seen alive like that, pretending not to notice is no longer an option. Before we continue, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's dive back into the story. The charity gala was in full swing by 7 o'clock. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the lakeside cultural pavilion, and the hum of polite conversation mixed with the soft clink of champagne flutes. Mallory Jackson moved between tables with practiced ease, refilling water glasses and clearing appetizer plates, her black vest and white shirt blending her into the background of wealth and influence. Near the edge of the room, she noticed him, a boy in a wheelchair, maybe 8 or 9 years old, positioned at a round table slightly apart from the main crowd. His posture was careful, his hands folded in his lap. A woman in a navy blazer, Margot Ellis Ford, the event coordinator, stood nearby, speaking quietly into a radio. Mallory slowed as she passed, pretending to adjust a napkin on an empty table. Doctors warned that emotional spikes could trigger an episode. Margot said into the radio, her voice low but firm, "We can't risk another incident in public." Mallory's eyes flicked to the boy. Rowan. She'd seen his name on the seating chart earlier. He was watching the stage where a string quartet played, his gaze fixed with the kind of hunger that made her chest tighten. But he didn't move, didn't clap, didn't smile. On the table beside him, a small laminated card sat face up. Mallory leaned in just enough to read it. Child must remain calm. Avoid stimulation. Her stomach turned. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. But what happens when those meant to protect become the ones who crush? Rowan shifted slightly in his chair, his fingers twitching toward the armrest, as if he wanted to reach for something, someone, but stopped himself. His eyes never left the stage. Mallory understood then. This wasn't cruelty. It was fear dressed up as care. A sterile kind of love that kept him safe by keeping him still, by keeping him small. She turned away, her tray heavy in her hands, and moved back toward the kitchen. But she couldn't stop glancing back. What no one explained was what a life without joy was already costing him. The music swelled. The crowd applauded. Rowan sat silent, a boy trapped in a room full of sound. Some moments only matter if someone stays long enough to notice them. What happens when someone finally does? Stay close. What's coming will break every rule in that room. Between performances, the pavilion settled into a softer rhythm. The string quartet had stepped away for intermission, and a jazz trio set up near the bar. Their sound was looser, warmer, a saxophone weaving through piano keys, like water over stone. Mallory was refilling coffee at a corner table when she noticed it. Rowan's fingers. They were moving. Not much. Just a gentle tap against the armrest of his wheelchair. 1, 2, 3, 4. Following the beat, his head tilted slightly, his eyes half closed. and for the first time all evening, he looked like a child instead of a patient. Mallory paused mid-pour. She didn't think. She just responded. From across the room, standing near the service station, she tapped her own fingers against the edge of her tray. Same rhythm, same beat. Rowan's eyes opened. He looked at her, and then he smiled. Not the polite, controlled expression he'd worn earlier. A real smile. Wide, bright, unguarded. A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. Sometimes the cure is the very thing we're told to avoid. Mallory smiled back, still tapping. She added a little bounce to her shoulders. Nothing dramatic, just enough to say, "I see you. I'm here." Rowan's smile grew wider. His fingers tapped faster, more confident now, matching her energy. Then she felt it. A shift in the room. Margot Ellis Ford stepped closer to Rowan's table, her expression neutral, but her posture rigid. Calvin Moore, head of security, appeared from the far wall, his eyes tracking the exchange. "Careful," someone whispered behind Mallory. She stopped tapping, set down the coffee pot, turned to clear a nearby plate. But when she glanced back, Rowan was still looking at her. The smile had faded, but something else remained. Hope, maybe, or recognition. Margot leaned down, adjusted something on Rowan's chair, and spoke quietly to him. He nodded. His hands returned to his lap. Still, controlled, safe. Mallory moved toward the kitchen, her pulse quickening. She hadn't touched him, hadn't spoken to him, hadn't done anything that could reasonably be called dangerous. But she understood now. Happiness itself was treated like a hazard. In this room, joy wasn't celebrated. It was monitored, measured, managed. What felt harmless to her was already being documented by someone else. Across the pavilion, Calvin Moore made a note on his tablet. Mallory just crossed a line she didn't know existed, and someone is already watching. What happens next will cost more than she imagines. Don't look away. Mallory slipped into the kitchen and found two other servers huddled near the coffee station, scrolling their phones during a rare break. "Hey," she said, keeping her voice low. "The boy in the wheelchair, Rowan. What's his story?" One of the servers, an older woman named Diane, glanced toward the door and lowered her voice. "Crowell Arden kid. His mother died a few years back. He had some kind of episode at a fundraiser not long after. Seizure, maybe? I wasn't there, but I heard it was bad. Ambulance, the whole thing. Since then," the other server added, "they keep him on lockdown. No excitement. No surprises. I worked an event last year where they wouldn't even let him near the dessert table because the sugar might overstimulate him." Diane shook her head. "Poor kid. He's sweet, but they treat him like he's made of glass." Mallory's jaw tightened. When was the last time anyone saw him laugh? Like really laugh? The two women exchanged glances. "I don't think I ever have," Diane said quietly. "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But sometimes the thief wears the face of concern and calls itself safety." Mallory returned to the pavilion, her chest heavy. She moved through the room mechanically, refilling glasses, clearing plates, avoiding Rowan's table even as her eyes kept drifting back to him. He sat perfectly still, perfectly quiet, perfectly absent. She should leave it alone. She was a waitress. He was the son of a billionaire. This wasn't her business. This wasn't her fight. But then she thought about that smile. That brief, unguarded moment when he'd looked at her and seen someone who wasn't afraid of his joy. They believed they were protecting him. No one measured what they were taking instead. Mallory made a decision she couldn't explain, even to herself. She stayed nearby, positioned herself at a table within his line of sight. Not hovering, not obvious, just present. Rowan noticed. His eyes found hers across the room, and something flickered there, gratitude maybe, or relief. The jazz trio finished their set. The crowd applauded politely. Margot Ellis Ford checked her watch and spoke into her radio again. Mallory wiped down a table, her movements slow, deliberate. And then the music changed. The pianist started playing something different, something upbeat, a melody that demanded movement, that called to something deeper than caution. Rowan's fingers twitched. Mallory felt her heartbeat quicken. What happens when the one thing a child needs is the one thing everyone fears? The answer is coming, and it will shatter everything. Stay right here. The upbeat melody filled the pavilion, and something shifted in the air. Rowan didn't ask permission. He didn't wait for approval. He just moved. His hands gripped the wheels of his chair, and he pushed forward, slowly at first, then with more purpose. Away from his table, away from Margot's watchful gaze, toward the stage. Mallory's breath caught. The crowd hadn't noticed yet. They were still talking, laughing, caught up in their own conversations. But she saw. She saw him rolling toward the music, like it was the only thing in the world that made sense. She should stop him. Call someone. Follow protocol. Instead, she walked toward him. They met at the edge of the stage. The jazz trio was still playing, lost in their own rhythm, unaware they'd become the soundtrack to something unplanned. Rowan looked up at Mallory. His eyes were bright, hopeful, terrified. She hesitated for only a second. Then she offered her hand. He took it. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And sometimes freedom looks like a boy and a waitress defying every rule written to keep him safe. Mallory helped him position his chair near the stage's gentle ramp. And then, impossibly, she began to sway. Just a little. Just enough. Her hand still holding his. Rowan smiled. Not the careful, guarded expression from before. A full, radiant smile that transformed his entire face. He moved with her. His upper body swayed to the beat, his free hand tapping the armrest, his head nodding in time with the saxophone. They weren't performing. They were just existing, together, in the music, in the moment. The room began to notice. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. Is that? Oh my God, look. Someone should stop. Mallory kept smiling, kept swaying, kept holding his hand. And then she saw him. Across the pavilion, standing near the main entrance, a man in an impeccable charcoal suit turned toward the stage. His expression was unreadable, shock maybe, or disbelief. Sebastian Crowell-Arden. He stared at his son, at the boy he'd kept carefully controlled, carefully protected, carefully contained. And he saw him alive in a way he never had. For a moment, it looked like joy had won. It hadn't. Margot Ellis Ford was already moving. Calvin Moore spoke rapidly into his radio. The music played on, but the room had turned cold. Most people leave when they think they've seen the moment that matters. They miss what it costs. What happens next will break someone, maybe everyone. You need to stay. You need to see this through. The music stopped mid-note. Not because the trio decided to end. Because Margot Ellis Ford raised her hand, a single, decisive gesture, and the musicians went silent. Calvin Moore appeared at Mallory's side. His voice was calm, professional, terrifyingly polite. Ms. Jackson, please come with me. No anger, no accusation, just a quiet directive that felt like a door closing. Mallory's hand slipped from Rowan's. She looked down at him. His smile was gone, replaced by confusion. Fear. Wait, he started. It's all right, Rowan, Margot said, already moving toward him. Let's get you back to your table. But I was just... I know, sweetheart, but we need to follow the rules. They crush the needy at the gate and push aside the just in a moment of power. Sometimes injustice wears a suit and calls itself procedure. Mallory followed Calvin toward a side corridor, her pulse hammering in her ears. Behind her, she heard the whispers growing louder. Phones were still out, videos already uploading. She glanced back once. Rowan was being wheeled away, his head turned over his shoulder, watching her disappear. In a small office off the main hall, Calvin opened a tablet, and began typing. Mallory stood across from him, still wearing her server's vest, feeling suddenly small. "What did I do wrong?" she asked. "Unauthorized emotional stimulation," Calvin said, without looking up. "The family has a documented care protocol. You violated it." I held his hand. We swayed to music. "You engaged with a minor under medical supervision without clearance. He's a child, not a prisoner." Calvin finally looked up. His expression wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was indifferent. "The report's been filed. You'll be paid for tonight and released from further assignments. No recommendation letter." Mallory's jaw tightened. "Where's his father?" "Mr. Crowell Arden has been informed." "And what did he say?" Calvin closed the tablet. "Nothing." Mallory left through the side exit, her steps echoing in the empty corridor. The gala continued inside, laughter, music, champagne. She didn't break a rule. She exposed a flaw in the system. Is safety still protection if it erases dignity? The question followed her into the cold Illinois night, unanswered and unresolved. Inside, Sebastian Crowell Arden stood near the stage, staring at the spot where his son had smiled. But the real consequence hadn't reached him yet. Mallory is gone. Rowan is silenced. Sebastian saw everything, but did nothing. What happens when the cost of safety becomes unbearable? The breaking point is close. Don't walk away now. Sebastian Crowell Arden sat alone in his study at 2:47 a.m., the glow of his laptop, the only light in the room. He'd watched the footage 11 times. Not the shaky phone videos that had already begun circulating on social media. Those he'd had scrubbed within an hour. This was the pavilion's security camera footage. High definition. Multiple angles. Unfiltered. He clicked play again. There, Rowan, wheeling himself toward the stage. No hesitation. No fear. Just movement with purpose. Then the waitress. Mallory Jackson, according to the incident report, sitting on his desk. She approached. Offered her hand. Rowan took it. Sebastian paused the video. Zoomed in on his son's face. The smile. He'd forgotten Rowan could smile like that. Open. Unguarded. Alive. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance. But the Lord looks at the heart. What if we've been protecting the wrong thing all along? Sebastian resumed playback. Watched them sway together. Watched his son's body move, not much, but enough. His head nodding. His hand tapping. His entire being engaged in something that wasn't therapy or treatment or carefully managed interaction. Just joy. Sebastian closed the laptop and pulled up Rowan's medical file on his second monitor. 3 years of documentation. Incident reports. Risk assessments. Behavioral protocols. Patient exhibits elevated heart rate and respiratory changes during moments of excitement. Recommend continued emotional regulation to prevent episodes. He scrolled further. Family advised to minimize unpredictable stimuli. Structured environment reduces seizure risk by estimated 67%. The numbers were there. The logic was sound. But nowhere in 3 years of documentation did anyone ask, what is this costing him? Sebastian leaned back in his chair, exhaustion settling into his bones. For the first time since his wife died, since that terrible night when Rowan collapsed at her memorial service, he allowed himself to question the framework he'd built. What if survival wasn't the only outcome that mattered? What if keeping Rowan safe had slowly turned into keeping him small? What if the protocols designed to protect his son were actually stealing the very life they claimed to preserve? Admitting that would implicate every choice he'd made, every therapy session, every canceled playdate, every moment he'd said no when Rowan asked to try something new, every time he'd chosen fear over faith. Sebastian opened his laptop again, looked at the frozen image of his son's smile, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't know what the right answer was. Sebastian finally sees what he's been avoiding, but seeing isn't the same as acting. The hardest choice is still ahead. Stay close. Mallory's phone rang at 9:15 a.m. on Monday. Unknown number. Lake Forest area code. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Jackson. A woman's voice. Professional. Come. This is Claire Donnelly, assistant to Sebastian Crowell Arden. Mr. Arden would like to meet with you this afternoon. 2 o'clock. Are you available? Mallory's stomach dropped. Am I being sued? No, ma'am. Just a conversation. She arrived at the Crowell Arden estate at 1:53 p.m., her hands clammy despite the cool autumn air. The security gate opened before she could press the intercom. Someone had been watching. Claire met her at the door and led her through a house that felt more like a museum, spotless, elegant, empty. They stopped at a study with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Sebastian Crowell Arden stood when she entered. He didn't smile, didn't offer his hand. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Please sit." Mallory sat. He remained standing for a moment longer, as if deciding something, then took the chair across from her. Silence stretched between them. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. Sometimes wisdom begins with listening to what we don't want to hear. Finally, Sebastian spoke. "Did you know the risk?" Mallory met his eyes. "Yes, you knew about the protocol. I overheard it. I saw the card. And you proceeded anyway." She didn't flinch. "Yes." "Why?" Mallory took a breath. "Because he wanted to. Because he was asking, without words, for someone to see him as more than a condition. And I thought, maybe just once, someone should say yes." Sebastian's jaw tightened. He looked away, toward the window. "You could have caused a medical emergency." "I know. You could have traumatized him." "I know. You risked your job, potential legal action, and his well-being for what? A moment." Mallory's voice stayed steady. For the chance that a moment might matter more than 3 more years of being safe and alone. The silence that followed felt like a verdict. Then Sebastian opened a folder on the table between them. "I'm revising Rowan's care protocol," he said quietly. "Controlled exposure to social situations. Music therapy. Supervised but less restrictive engagement. It won't be publicized. There won't be announcements or press releases." He looked at her directly. "You won't be thanked for this." Mallory nodded slowly. "I don't need to be." Sebastian closed the folder. "That's why I called you. Some truths don't feel good. That's how you know they matter." The meeting ended. No apology. No celebration. Just a quiet shift in a system that had been built on fear. Change happened, but not the way anyone expected. One more chapter remains. Don't leave before you see what it cost, and what it gave back. 3 months later, Mallory returned to the Lakeside Pavilion. Not as a server this time. As a guest. It was a smaller event. A winter recital hosted by the Lake Forest Community Arts Program. Fewer cameras. Less champagne. More families. She spotted Rowan near the front, his wheelchair positioned at an accessible table. But this time, he wasn't isolated. 2 other children sat with him, laughing at something on a tablet. One of them, a girl with braids, reached over and high-fived him. He high-fived her back. Mallory felt her chest tighten. Sebastian stood a few feet away, close enough to respond if needed, far enough to let Rowan be. His posture had changed. Less rigid. More present. He wasn't managing his son anymore. He was with him. When the music started, Rowan's fingers began to tap. No one stopped him. No one whispered. No protocol card sat on the table. "He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God?" Sometimes love means unlearning what we thought would save us. After the performance, Mallory approached slowly. Rowan saw her first. His face lit up. "You came." "I did," she said, smiling. Sebastian turned. Their eyes met. He nodded, not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. "Would you like to stay for dessert?" Sebastian asked. There's cake. Apparently sugar is back on the menu. Mallory laughed softly. I'd like that. They sat together. Sebastian, Rowan, Mallory, and the two other children who'd already forgotten that anything about this moment was supposed to be unusual. No miracle happened. No grand speech was given. No viral video was shared. Just permission. Permission for Rowan to laugh when something was funny. To move when the music played. To reach out when he wanted connection. Permission to be a child who happened to need care. Not a condition that happened to have a child attached. Protection isn't the absence of risk. It's the presence of care. The evening ended quietly. Families filtered out into the cold December night. Rowan wheeled himself toward the exit, chatting with the girl with braids about something Mallory couldn't quite hear. Sebastian walked beside his son. Not behind him. Not ahead of him. Beside him. Mallory stayed a moment longer, watching them disappear into the parking lot. She didn't need thanks. Didn't need recognition. She just needed to know that one moment, one choice to say yes when everyone else had been saying no, had mattered. And it had. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with breath, with presence, with a child who finally gets to be both safe and seen. If you stayed for this, thank you. The quiet endings are the ones that last.